Carl Jung has challenged me as an author and a thinker more so than a lot of other people have in the past. Like this has really been, if you take seriously the things he believes and says, it is perspective changing.
Yeah, yeah.
And I admire his mind, and I do take him seriously. I don't know that I agree with him, but it's really something to get into, and it's what I've been doing over the last month or two. And so it's, I
mean, I see how it has affected you.
Do you?
You seem, when I speak to you, you seem in between two worlds at times. When we talk about Jung or whatever you're preparing to read or whatever, it seems like you are taking on a great labor in some ways, which to my understanding is what it's like to read Jung. It's not easy. It's not something you read in passing. And I haven't read Jung. Like, I've only read excerpts or secondhand descriptions of his ideas and work. I find him inaccessible. And I think that is, in a way, that's a testament to the seriousness of his work and his thought, is that it requires being willing to truly engage in other ways of understanding the world. And I think that that's something that we say, but we don't really understand. You said this, to take the idea seriously. And I've thought about that more, what that even means, because so it's funny. I was taking a walk outside today before we recorded, and I had noticed a week ago or something, there's this construction going on here. And so there's some kind of construction machine device car. I don't know, like those things with big tires.
Machine car.
Construction vehicle. I don't know. They're orange, they do the construction. And it's covered in dust, but someone drew a little heart in the dust, okay, on the windshield. And I didn't think much about it at first, but then as I would see it again and again and again, it started to stick out to me more and more. And today I walked by it and I realized how nice it actually is. I thought it was nice, and because I was willing to think about it more deeply, and I took it more seriously is what it was. And I thought about how there's one way that you can see things like that, and it's the way that I usually would see a little heart on the ground or something, which is, whatever. Very desensitized, very not engaging with it. It's on the surface. I take in the stimulus and I move on. But this time I thought about it more, and I thought about how in some ways you could see it almost as this strange obsession that human beings have with this concept of love. Because that's what that is, right? It's a symbol. We're so desensitized to what the heart is, but it's a symbol. And to do that, why do humans put hearts everywhere? It's actually so strange when you think about it more deeply, when you're willing to realize how strange it is that we're so fixated with this symbol and that it's so common to us all. And here's a funny thing. So I walked past that construction machine, and not even a block away, there was another heart on the ground, but it was the kind that someone had done when the pavement was still being dried. And so they engraved a heart with names in it, which is, of course, something so common. We don't care. And put names in it, whatever. They're probably broken up. That type of cynicism that keeps us looking at things from a distance in a way. And then I realized, what a strange thing for there to be these two symbols of, this archetype of love in a way, within a block of each other, and on my block. And I thought about how if you're willing to be more open to things in a more deep way and try to take them more seriously for having possibilities of meaning that you don't immediately conceive of, it's, in a weird way, it opens you up to other ways of understanding the world. And so I thought about it as I saw these two hearts, and I realized there is absolutely a version of me in the past that would have not even paid attention to them or just dismissed it as kind of like, oh, someone thought they were cute, you know, that type of thing. And my willingness to look at them more deeply instead gave me this other form of understanding, which is, look at how loving humans are. And I know that sounds like so like soft and woo-woo and whatever, but I mean, what else can you say when we're drawing little hearts all over the place and we all know what it means? So it's like this other way that you can understand things if you're willing to be open to another way of understanding it. But you have to take things more seriously. And it's strange because at the same time, I think we need to take a lot much less seriously. Like, we need to take ourselves less seriously. We need to take these like politics, all these surface level things less seriously, but we need to take more universal, timeless things more seriously. It's a very hard thing to describe.
I agree with you. I think that you always have to walk that line between, especially if you're prone to seeing patterns and things, you know, you gotta, you have to walk the line between getting too caught up in the patterns and not.
Yeah, no, that's
Right.
for sure. There is and we know that kind of person, right? That's like, you drop your purse and it's like, what does it mean? Well, you know, now that's the other extreme where you ascribe meaning to everything that happens. But I think the way that you can understand whether you're doing that or not is, I mean, you have to be like a little bit more of a rigorous thinker, right? Which is that idea of like why Jung is able to work with these ideas that otherwise we kind of think of them like astrology. We think of it as like, oh, this is kind of like feeble thought in a way. Like, this is very, like, it's not logical or whatever. But he approaches these things in a rigorous way that is thought out and that uses evidence and that asks questions of what it thinks, you know. And that's kind of the thing is like, okay, I can look at the little hearts and say, it's just a coincidence that there's two of them. It's just there. Someone's probably trying to, I could do what I've always done, which is just be like, oh, it's just people trying to make a mark on the ground because everybody has to let someone know they've been around. Like, but you do in a way have to choose how you interpret the world, you know? And so I think that understanding that there's a choice that you make there in how you interpret the world. And this is why I think politics is so poisonous for people's way of thinking when it gets to like, when it becomes the dominant way of thinking, is that it actually is a way of interpreting the world. And you can see that when, like, it's the same thing of like my purse falls down and I'm like, oh, the Republicans, you know. It's like everything gets tied in to this narrative. And so I think you can be, if you're willing to be like flexible about that narrative, that's kind of like the more scientific way of thinking, right? Which is, I have a hypothesis, but I'm willing to let things test it, and I'm willing to let it go if it doesn't make sense or if it's not strong even. So I don't know. I think that it's something that everybody has to do for themselves, and that's why I don't think that there's any. I don't know, man. I don't think you can even tell someone anymore like, here's the way to see the world. You know, I think more in terms of, here are tools that will help you to find the way that you need to see the world. I don't know, because who knows? Maybe you need to see the world differently depending where you are in the world, what time you live in, what mode of life you're pursuing. You know what I mean? Like, maybe an artist needs to see the world differently than a surgeon.
I think that it's difficult because in some ways you have to either say everything matters to the smallest thing, or nothing does. And the thing is, in other words, you can have a conception of reality of strictly materialist. There's a very strict causality that can be scientifically explained. You can describe your own psyche and thoughts as chemical processes going on in your brain and all that. You can live that way. in a way, right? It's a safe way to live in some ways. And it may be correct in many ways. Or then you can go the other route, which is to believe that there is meaning to almost everything, or really everything. And I think that's how human beings used to live until fairly recently. The problem is this, that we live in a half world in which we haven't accepted strict materialism, most of us, completely. But we also have rejected and lost all of the symbols and stories and myths that made sense of a world, that gave order to a world which was so rich with meaning it could overwhelm you if you didn't have the structures in place to interpret it. And now we live in this limbo. Now we live in this thing where we do believe in science and the scientific method to a large degree. We see the results of it around us in the buildings that we can build and the internet and all the technology and all these things, which are great things. We see that there's efficacy to that. But we're living like in between these two different ways of seeing things. I don't know how that's going to work out. I don't know how that ends up playing out, because it seems to me that that you become dizzy in a way in this kind of like swing back and forth between the materialistic view and the view of a world that is intrinsically meaningful.